September has a pretty bad rep in the financial world, especially crypto. But we could actually be embarking on one of the best entries you can have in this year. And there's three reasons for that. Normally after a reset, you get a rotation. ETF inflows are still relatively strong despite the downward price action. And Q4 is usually pretty good, not just for crypto, for the equity markets too. Now, a quick one before I go on. I am opening up my DCA challenge from my Patreon onto YouTube, so I will be covering it as a part of a little bit of a transparency thing just to showcase certain things. But I want one more asset. Let me know in the comments which asset I should buy. I have Bitcoin and I have Solana. What should be the third one? In the news, as you can imagine, and what you can see, is a little bit of fear. A little bit of fear, a little bit of fear. Now, the big drop and the Bitcoin is expected to drop in September narrative is pretty big. That worries me. I don't like that. But ultimately, it can be quite true in this month. However, thus being said, it might not be. Now, this article isn't terrible. It's kind of going on the side of the obvious, and this is kind of what I like in a way. But as I say, if everyone's planning for it, it might be a little bit different. Just keep your mind open to that. So Bitcoin may avoid a big September drop and could aim for new highs soon. That's one of the key takeaways. Yeah, I'll show you the structure. Stick around. You'll see that in a minute. But normally, as you can imagine here, and what it's outlining is kind of what's obvious. Technically, September is a bit of an iffy month. Now, we're not just talking here about Bitcoin here. We're talking the obvious in the room, equities. Now, since 1928, the S&P index usually returns pretty negatively in September. That's where we're going. Now, obviously, Bitcoin does mirror a lot of the work of the S&P 500, and that's going to be very, very interesting to see where we go from here. But as you can imagine with this article, which is what I like about it, we've been here before. Now, a lot of people in my comment section whinge at me about being a bit bearish sometimes, and I know we're analysing, we're talking about the world of 2017 versus 2025. A lot of people are jumping to conclusions that we're going to get a similar sort of alt season versus here. We probably won't. If that happens, right, I'm going to say it now. If we get a element of this where we go to the moon, we're not going to see, I don't think, altcoins run as crazy as you think. And I know that's a bit bearish, sorry. The obvious will run. The top 20, top 50 coins will probably run where the liquidity will go. But some of the shit coins won't because there's too much going on. Now, the reality is, I hope this does happen, but the fundamentals are pretty clear. There's too many altcoins versus liquidity, so it might be a lot more concentrated, right? So just keep that in mind, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the reality is here, we are looking at potential opportunity zones where we could be looking for the obvious dip here that could send 2025 into a much better year, potentially in terms of result and performance. Unless you bought Bitcoin at the lows, you're probably all right. Unless you bought Ethereum at the lows, you're probably all right, for example, right? So it may well save your season, but ultimately it's looking pretty good, in my viewpoint, for a potential retest of lows. Liquidity is going to get bought up and we're going to go higher. And again, we need to talk about the world of liquidity, the world of the institutional investment. The ETFs have saw a pretty decent run over the course of August. And you can see here, rotation, rotation, rotation. It has happened. I even posted on it on my X account yesterday about how it goes from Bitcoin to Ethereum, Solana into big caps. And we never really get past second base, which is Ethereum. We are still there. It's still happening, which is good. We want it to happen, obviously. But where does it go next? And you can see here, Ethereum steady inflows have helped gain a 25% over the course of the last 30 days versus Bitcoin's recent struggles, which is fine. We like that. That's good. But where does it go next? That's the ultimate question. Why is every single article these days you've got to pay for? It's really annoying, just saying. But anyways, moving on. The US market is going to be very critical in this month. In terms of September, we've got to talk about dollar yields. We've got to talk about the US job reports, what happened on Friday, which wasn't the greatest. We've got to talk about potential FOMC at the end of the month, which will be a potential rate cut, which is probably pretty probable. We've got to talk about CPI data and PPI data this month. It's going to be a very, very critical month, which could lead to that situation where we may well get a bit of havoc over the course of this month, leading into a pretty interesting Q4. Let's talk about Bitcoin, eh? So Bitcoin's quite good, in my viewpoint. We're doing everything that I'm somewhat expecting it to do. We have gone and retested the 618 from the previous structure low. And more importantly, we've hit the EMA 21 on the nose on the weekly time frame. It's looking all right. So it is intact and it still looks relatively good. We've had an obvious ugly deviation here, which is fine, and we're much, much higher. But when we talk about the obvious in the room here, what if we are just doing a little bit of a recess and we're going to go much higher? Now, if you follow me on Patreon, there's a link below. There's a 90% off your first month. If you are interested, you can jump in, use code FREE90. But my exit elements are up and around here as potential taking money off the table, and we'll see where we go. There is obviously a lot of people that are talking about Bitcoin going much higher, but we'll see where we go. However, thus being said, it feels like we are going to do another leg up from this point. But we may go lower first. Just saying, right? Just saying. So it may be a bit wishy-washy, a bit ugly, and a bit horrible for a lot of people who hold and expecting to make money very, very quickly. May not be the same. Invalidations for me will be roughly around that 98%, $98,000, sorry, not 98%. If your bags are down 98%, I'd just give up and quit if I was you, personal opinion. But yeah, the reality is I think we're going to get a really interesting level of, liquidity. But I'm going to say this now and contradict myself a little bit. How low do we go? Well, the situation is from the all-time high to where we are right now, we are already down 13%. That is quite a bit of a tasty drop, just saying. So yeah, with me and my DCA account, which I've started about 11 months ago, the orders I've been getting over the last week or so have been pretty good, pretty nice versus what they were not so long ago. So yeah, even though I struggled a little bit in June because of obviously baby and stuff like that, but ultimately it's still looking relatively good and healthy, even though we are much, much higher since I started. Let's talk about Ethereum. Now, Ethereum BTC pair bottom is in my viewpoint. Where do we go next? So where do we end up? Do we end up at around 6,000 sats? Do we go even higher? Where do we go? And the institutional inflows on this is still, let me press the refresh button because I'm probably a bit out of date here. So where are we in terms of the institutional side? Well, we're here. It's still looking relatively positive, relatively strong, and it's still green up, well, black up, so to speak. It's going mental, right? That's what you want, which is good. It's fine. Now, again, going back to the BTC chart, this is the most important chart you need. It's still looking relatively strong. It's above everything. It's looking great. The BTC dominance is obviously dropping in the line of this because obviously it's the biggest competitor to Bitcoin currently. And the reality is, where do we go next? Now, that's the ultimate question. Where do we go next? Do we pull back first? Do we drop? Potential drop incoming in my viewpoint. But the reality is we are still change character looking relatively good. There's some content creators out there that think this is going to go lower. I don't think it will, personally. I think that's kind of like, if we flop here and go lower, you just give up. Just that's it. Altcoins are done for, literally. Like that would be the narrative, so to speak. But we have other situations where we are going into a bullish Q4 potentially if we're coming on the back of a bit of a correction, a reset, as I say, right? But what does that mean? Now, the two scenarios are simple. I mentioned it before with Bitcoin. If Bitcoin really takes off from obviously end of September, October time, Ethereum has to go with it. If, say, Bitcoin flies to 200k, just probability rise or whatever, and it goes mental, like proper berserk, the altcoins have to rotate and they have to get interest because something has to happen. Bitcoin will have to hit a certain price point to get interest. Ethereum is the same. Whether it's $5,000, $5,500 or $6,000 to get people going, whoa, I'm going to buy back into that again. That will be where it will get a bit crazy. Same with Solana, with the meme coins and all that narrative, right? Where does it go? Well, that's the ultimate question. Even if Ethereum goes up here and Bitcoin doubles in price, you're still looking at a 5-figure Ethereum technically, which would be crazy. But it's not improbable, obviously. So keep an eye on it. But for me, the inflows are looking relatively good. With that, as I say, the dominance of Ethereum has massively changed. The lows of 7% up to 14%. If you bought these lows and the tariff situation, well done. I wish I did. But I'm not really an Ethereum holder. But thus being said, there's still potential opportunity here because we have made a new all-time just by skin of one bollock. But we went and retested these levels here, which is what I expected in one of my previous videos. We're holding pretty well. It's looking pretty good. It's looking okay. The downside to this is where do we go in terms of the situation? Now, I'm betting on the fact that we are going to go for a bit of a wishy-washy, horrible September and probably go and readdress this area around $4,000. That might be where it gets a bit spicy. It's not that far away though. If you think about it in logical terms, if we're talking about percentage levels, we're only looking about 10% down. That's not massive. So don't worry about it too much. But the situation is we have to keep it very, very simple because we've had a massive break of that structure. We probably will go and retest that again if the market is relatively meh. But remember, news is the driver here. Everything that we're talking about is news, literally. If it's FOMC, if it's this, if it's that, what's Trump going to do with tariffs? Is he going to get spooked? What's the dollar going to do? All that situation. It's pretty important. And realistically, we're talking about institutional money here. More and more ETFs come online, more and more institutions buy it, more and more treasuries want to get it. It's going to go probably up. And the fact that I just said probably up is very, very key here because we need to start talking about profit taking and buy-in zones and all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna start analysing the chart in a more simple, vanilla way. This for me is kind of the obvious in the room for altcoins, Bitcoin dominance, obviously. We've got bearish on altcoins if it goes higher. We've got the base case of potentially where it could probably go if Ethereum starts getting its finger out of its arse. And then bullish case is obviously from here downwards, right? Obviously. So that's the most important factor we've got to look at. But let's do this for more charts. Let's go through some stuff in fine-grained detail because for me, the total market cap minus Bitcoin, minus Ethereum has to be talked about. So the most obvious one is realistically this sort of zone where we are right now, give or take around this point. Now let's just keep it real simple. Let's just talk about this as buy zone, right? Now, this is very, obviously, it depends on you. Buy zone for altcoins is going to be as this gets low, right? That's the thing. This isn't obviously an individual element. It isn't so much like, oh my God, this is like, I must buy my altcoins at these vibes. It's more the fact that the probable chance of you getting an altcoin at the lows in the BTC pair is probably pretty likely when this is down. Obviously, up is good. So when you look at that, then you've got potential profit zones potentially in and around certain regions, which you're going to look at around here, give or take. It depends on you, obviously. But ultimately, you've got to press the red button somewhere and sell, right? So when we're talking about these sort of levels, these will remain on my chart and we're going to kind of plot it through. You're going to look at these areas and higher, obviously not just here, above here. Once you're above here, it's like fucking just keep riding the monkey sort of thing, right? Just keep going with it. So you got to look at that situation where you got to look at that sort of situation where, well, when do I buy, when do I sell? Well, ultimately, you got to look at certain situations. And as I say, you can be looking at this region. So obviously, yes, you got profit zone and whatever, but it depends on you, right? Obviously. The reality is, though, not everyone will get there because ultimately you may be buying the wrong thing. Every individual asset will be different. If you are following the big boys, this will probably work out pretty well. Now, if you're looking at the other stuff, which is others.btc or others.d, whatever, this is also a very, very interesting chart because ultimately what this is everything in the top 100 pretty much without the top 10, I think, something like that, can't remember, something stupid either way. So with that, obviously, yes, you're looking at buy zones in and around when the lows are, and more importantly, you will be taking profit much, much, much higher potentially. But that's the thing, where do we go here? Do we go up to here and is that it? And then from there on, we're like, you take your money, you take your risk off the table, then you ride it to oblivion to see where it goes. But I want to talk about something pretty important here because when we're talking about these, and I know people are like, oh my God, like this isn't, I'm not making loads of money here. It's like, why is that not, there it is. So when we're talking about this, right, let's talk about it. For obvious reasons, yes, you're going to go much, much, much higher. You know, you take profit, then you're going to go higher. The thing is, right, even though it went high, we didn't go as low. And then we went high and we didn't go as low. So there's an element of diminishing returns here. Where do we go next? Do we make a much, much bigger high or do we not? And we fail and we go up to here and then that's why I put this profit zone here because even with this, right, and I'm shit you not, if you're buying certain type of altcoins and you do a move like this and it's only point whatever in terms of basis points around it, it's still going to be a very, very big gain because altcoins, in my viewpoint, versus BTC, really low. So that's going to be important. So keep an eye on it. Obviously, if you're buying at the lows, sweet, amazing, well done. But for me, you got to look at certain points and areas and whatever. We haven't really broken character here, which is important. So once that happens, it'll make it a lot easier. The final thing to look at, in my viewpoint, is this one, the existing liquidity. Now, this is a really interesting chart. Now, for me, these areas here, it's going to confuse you now. Profit. These have to be profit zones, right? Why? The lower this is, the better it is, because you've got less stable currencies in the market. Actually, I'll hold on. I'll change that to buy, then I'll move it to the top. See? So then you can see it. It'll make more sense in a minute. Boink. So when these are high, it's time to somewhat, I wouldn't say buy, but when you're at like points like this, it needs to go much, much higher. So when you're looking at certain situations, so say if you are holding the entire loot and you're in altcoins, you're in Bitcoin, and we're down here, there's a good chance the market will probably top. Just saying. Because when we see like situations like this at the lows, this was when it went a bit crazy. And then we had that horrible correction in the May. We went boom. And then we actually finished up here realistically. So the lower this goes, the better it is, because stable currencies will rule the roost. Now, again, you got situations like this where obviously not so much buy, but you will be considering DCA because the market should be much lower at these highs. Put it that way. So that's kind of the vibe with this chart, sort of chart, where you're looking much, much higher. And when this goes up high, you should be seeing some much lower orders in potential areas around your DCA. Obviously, I'm hoping we'll go lower first. But we have came a cropper here before. This is where we've had mini alt season kind of situations. But they've been failures. Whenever we've hit these lows, so just to give you an idea, this was that end of 2023 into 2024, the AI boom. And then we had that inauguration boom where the ISO coins did really well. And this is where we are at now, where Ethereum is leading that leg. But we've actually had an overall situation where we've failed at this point. This is where it gets interesting. So it's going to be very, very interesting where we go. So yeah, I'm hoping those charts kind of help you out in terms of managing your emotions a little bit, because I'm going to keep them on my chart. I'm thinking they're going to be pretty interesting and pretty good to look at. I'll probably add other ones as well eventually. But as much as they are big ballpark areas, you've got to kind of know the rhythm of the market. And at the end of the day, risk on, risk off, de-risking, whatever it may be, whether it is you're adding to your DCAs more aggressively at the lows, or if you're doing less at the highs and you're taking money off the table, whatever it may be, it will hopefully help you. And I'm hoping, by the way, by me talking, this makes sense as well in terms of why this was a red zone and why you should be taking profit much higher. This is doing really well. It's interesting to see if Bitcoin really runs off, because it may well make this spread out a bit more. If you're interested in trading or even just buying spot and you want something easy that is open to the UK, mostly UK people, or if you're in Europe, Blowfin is fully open, no KYC, and you can get in straight away without any worry. There's been a lot of exchanges recently that have been crashing and been failing. Binance was one of them recently. So jump in. Link below. Let's talk about the traditional market, because I think it's going to be very, very interesting to talk about this, because this is the dollar. The dollar has came from lofty heights from when Trump got put in power, tariffs announced, whatever, and the dollar has dropped significantly. It's been ranging at this point, but it is starting to slow, in my viewpoint, break down. We could be seeing again levels of like low 97s and into the 96s again, which is going to be very, very interesting. Obviously, certain things have happened, obviously, with tariffs and stabilization of news and other bits and pieces around FOMC, and the dollar has been getting pretty weak. And obviously, a drop in dollar is bullish for everything pretty much, right? So that's going to be important. We also have this week, on Friday, non-farm payroll, which could be perfect for entries, but ultimately it could create a bit of havoc in the market, especially when we look at the obvious in the room of the S&P 500 is still trickling north. We are still looking relatively strong. It's still chugging away, even though there's potential divergences all over the gap and we could just go, it's looking relatively strong. So we need to keep an eye on it. But that worries me in one way, where it's still strong, but ultimately will it eventually give up the ghost and just flop off a cliff? Which kind of worries me, because we have had little corrections, but we have kind of retested back up to those highs. But as you can say, it will hopefully be nowhere near as bad as what happened in April, February time, or March, give or take, because it was a pretty brutal period then. So yeah, keep an eye on it. But another thing of a bit of unsteadiness in the market is the fact that gold is breaking out. It's breaking up. It's going higher. Crazy. So what does gold know? What do the gold bugs know versus everything else? Everything else is coming down and gold's going up, and people are starting to get a bit protective over their liquidity. Are we going to go into a lull and a holiday season where we get a bit of a drying up period, especially for the ETFs, which is what we need to keep an eye on? But as I say before, jump in my Patreon. I'll be doing a full deep dive analysis on altcoins and other analysis on tomorrow's video and other bits throughout the week. Also, the Discord is pretty useful for some alpha. So yeah, let's just see where we end up in September. Could be very bullish, could be very bearish. It's very, very early to say, but we have a lot of things to rattle through this month. It's going to be pretty interesting. The first big one, realistically, is going to be non-farm payroll at the end of this week. So there we go. I hope you are happy with that. Simple, simple, simple. By the way, though, as I said, jump in the comment section, argue amongst yourselves between which asset I should be adding to my DCA fund, which I will be covering in a video every single week pretty much in terms of what I'm doing and my plan, and if I'm taking profit, what I'm doing with that profit, what am I rotating into. And if you like this sort of stuff, please do chuck a like on the video and subscribe if you've not yet done so.